Hello guys, I'm back from my little break, and today's video will be a bit of a different one. I'll be covering a much more relevant and recent topic, which is the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or as I like to call it, the Triple B, into law. Now it's called big for a good reason. I mean, look at these changes, like oh my god! So obviously, it can be hard to understand what all the changes are and what they even involve. That's what today's video is about. The first video in a 3 or 2-part series where we go over a brief introduction as to what the One Big Beautiful Bill will change and what it will involve. And this will be explained through the context of our favorite game, Minecraft. So welcome to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act explained through Minecraft. I hope you enjoy. So first, we can break this Triple B Act into 3 main categories: tax changes, spending increases, and spending cuts. So for this video, we'll just be going over tax changes. This section is by far the biggest in terms of just number of changes, a lot of which involves deductions. And so let's get into it, with the first one being the addition of tip and overtime deductions. So to understand what this even means, let's imagine a man named Mr. Villager who works at a restaurant as a waiter. Now because he is a waiter, he gets tips. For an example, let's say that he made 100 emeralds in tips. And let's say that his wage from the restaurant was 500 emeralds. So in total, Mr. Villager has made 600 emeralds. Now normally, these 600 emeralds would be taxed by the government under income tax. But in this new situation, the 100 emeralds from the tips are deducted from the tax. This means that Mr. Villager is taxed for his 500 emeralds, but not the 100 in tips, letting him keep the whole 100. Now this same logic is also applied to the overtime tax deduction as well. Say Mr. Villager earned 500 emeralds from his office job, but then also earned 50 emeralds extra from overtime shifts. He is then only taxed for the 500 emeralds and gets to keep the full 50 emeralds of overtime pay. Now this policy, along with pretty much every other tax change policy here, has limits. What I mean by this is that tips can only be deducted until $25,000 per year, while overtime being deducted till $12,500 a year. So this means that if Mr. Villager makes more than $25,000 in tips, he can only keep the $25,000 before everything else is taxed. These policies both have $150,000 income phaseouts, which means for every $1,000 Mr. Villager is over $150,000 a year, he loses $100 of deductions. So let's say that he earns $160,000 per year. That means that he only has $24,000 in deductions, since he's $10,000 over the limit and therefore loses $1,000 of deductions. Now moving on, let's look at the changes made to standard deductions. Now what are standard deductions? Well, they're basically a set dollar amount as to how much a person can deduct from their taxable income based on their living status. Say Mr. Villager earns 10,000 emeralds a year, and because of his status as a single man, he has a set amount from the government, like 2,000 emeralds, that can be subtracted from his taxable income. So instead of being taxed for the whole 10,000, he's instead taxed if his income was 8,000. Now if he was a married man or head of household, that would mean a different amount of emeralds that can be deducted. It's just all based on how you're living. This is the most common way people deduct taxes. Now what the Triple B Act does is raise all of the standard deduction amounts. So the government would change the standard deduction for single adults from 2,000 emeralds to something like 2,500 emeralds. Meaning Mr. Villager gets more emeralds for himself. Now the numbers I've been giving are just arbitrary, they're just examples, but the exact numbers are up here. Now after 2025, these numbers may change based on inflation. And more or less of the time, since inflation goes up, most of the standard deductions will increase. Now standard deduction is the most common way for taxpayers to deduct taxes, but there's also another way called itemized deductions. Certain types of deductions, like mortgage interest, state or local taxes, and medical expenses, are all considered to be itemized deductions. So let's say that Mr. Villager has some expensive medical treatments, and realizes that using itemized deductions would let him deduct more emeralds from taxes than the standard one. So this is where he would use itemized deductions instead of standard deductions. Now the important category to look at in this act is the SALT deduction, or state and local taxes deduction. The act would increase the cap for state and local tax deductions by 4 times, for about 4 years before going back down. In the actual act, it goes from $10,000 to $40,000. Now what this means is that Mr. Villager is able to deduct much more of his state and local taxes before reaching the cap. And this really benefits those who live in high tax states. Think New York or like California. These guys will be using much more of this new cap. Now moving on to the next change, this involves car loan interest deductions. Say that Mr. Villager buys a car with a loan and pays interest. He is now able to deduct however much he paid in interest from his income. So let's say that his income is 10,000 emeralds a year. If he paid 500 emeralds in car loan interest, he can deduct that from his taxable income, and now he is taxed as if he had 9,500 emeralds. Now in order to qualify for this car loan deduction, the car must be 1, newly made, and 2, the car has to be assembled in the United States. This is in line with the push that Trump has made to make the United States more self-sufficient. Now this policy also has limits, with the phase-outs happening to those with incomes more than $100,000 a year. Now for every $1,000 you're over the limit, you lose $200 of deductions, so a little less than the tips and overtime policy from before. The deductions also can only go up to a limit of $10,000. Now let's look at the changes made to senior tax deductions. For this, let's imagine that Mr. Villager has grown to the great age of 65. At this point, anyone who is 65 or over can deduct an additional $6,000 from their taxable income. Now this is on top of the standard deductions that we talked about earlier. So this means that Mr. Villager now has an additional amount of deductions he can do, which can help with his savings in retirement. Now there are also phase-outs in this deduction too, starting at $75,000 a year, while for deductions, it decreases at a rate of $200 per $1,000 you're over the phase-out limit. And for the last topic I'll be covering today, the act changes the limit on how much child tax credit is given to families. To understand what child tax credit is, let's say that Mr. Villager has a kid. As long as the child has a valid social security number, as well as one of the parents, they are able to reduce the amount of federal taxes that they owe. Now this is the difference between tax credits and deductions. Tax credits lets Mr. Villager change how much he owes, not how much is calculated. Now in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, this tax credit is increased from $2,000 to $2,400. So now Mr. Villager owes $400 less in federal taxes. Now this child tax credit number is also now being affected by inflation, so the credit will probably increase over time. This helps Mr. Villager out and lets him get through the financial costs of having a child a little easier. Now the phase out for this one is going to be $200,000 a year. And for every $1,000 Mr. Villager is over the limit, he's going to be losing $50 of deductions. So the phase out is definitely a lot slower than all the other policies. And that's most of what there is to tax changes within this bill. There are a few that I left out though, and that's just because I thought they were pretty self-explanatory. Now it's good to note that these tax changes are definitely not free. There's a lot of different trade-offs like the spending cuts and the increase of the national debt, but I'll be going over most of that in part 2. Sorry for taking such a long break. I'll be back with a regular upload soon enough. I hope this clears up some of the confusion. Best of luck with your studies, and bye bye.